First of all, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thanks for taking the time. You and I have known each other for, the better part of what, 6, 7 years?
Yeah,
somewhere in
I
there?
feel like it's been decades, but yeah, in the best of ways. In the best of ways. Yeah.
When did you start? When did you start your practice?
2009, 2008, 2009.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a long time.
And you're the first national telehealth functional medicine practice, right?
International. But yeah, certainly most of our patients are in the United States. But yeah, we have patients all around. And we didn't even have the language for it 15, 16 years ago. We called it we didn't say telehealth back then. We said a virtual functional medicine clinic because that was the best I could come up with. Because I was like, how do you explain what we do? And it was because I was mutual friends of ours. Like I wrote on Mind Body Green back in the day about functional medicine. And there weren't that many of us writing and talking online about functional medicine. So I had to kind of work out, all right, this person's in Idaho. I'm here. Like, how do I get labs? How do I work out the logistics of this thing that's called telehealth? So I was like, years later when the pandemic rolls around, I was like, this is what I've been doing my entire career. So it worked out, because more people grew in awareness of this was a thing and actually made healthcare more efficient in many ways. Obviously not replacing like physical exams and there's some things you're going to still need your local PCP. We're not replacing your PCP, but we are providing functional medicine perspective and guidance and direction on complex health issues and for people that are looking to level up their health.
Have you seen in the last 15 years, well, let me rephrase. How has the knowledge base and interest level in functional health changed in the last 15 years?
I think it's grown tremendously. I think that there's more options more than ever before, which is great because when you look at the chronic disease epidemic, there's more and more people talking about what we talk about, and it's needed. And I think more and more people are talking about it because more and more people are demanding it. And 15, 16 years ago, there wasn't functional medicine institutes at mainstream medical systems. Like the Cleveland Clinic has a functional medicine center now. Like I never would have thought that 15, 16 years ago.
Wow.
And many other mainstream hospitals and medical institutions have functional medicine centers because the data speaks for itself. We have a chronic disease epidemic. We spend more on healthcare than any other country. And we have the most chronic disease and the shortest lifespan of all industrialized nations. So I think people are waking up slowly and questioning, really, is this the best way? Just because a guy or person with the white coat says it, is that really the best way? And it's causing the conventional systems to actually do better. And certainly there are pockets of light. It's not the system at large, but it's still, I think, movement in the right direction. And it's very analogous, I think, to the natural food world, right? When you go to Expo West, like we both have, it's like, all right, people are voting with their dollars in that way and causing big food to find ways to give people what they want. And I think the same thing's happening in healthcare. I would say that healthcare world moving slower than the food world, but that's to be expected.
Sure. Yeah, it's going to follow. That's really great perspective. And you're exactly right on the natural food world because I didn't enter it until 2012. But it started in 2009, right about the time you were starting yours, because both of my parents were diagnosed with chronic illnesses. Both were related to diet and lifestyle. And so I just took an interest in food and its impact on our health holistically. And, as I started to learn how to cook and learn how to read ingredient panels and things like that, my friends were stealing my beef jerky that I was making, homemade beef jerky, just as a good protein snack. And they were stealing it at work. But, when you look across the grocery store, in my mind, I went, okay, there's got to be a way to start to disrupt, some of these categories that just are absolute garbage. And I couldn't think of a worst one at the time than meat snacks. It's like the old gas station feedlot meat and all sorts of mystery ingredients and
Yep.
sugar and all these things. And I thought, man, we can do better. And so that was just really like, well, let's go disrupt the first one that is the grossest. And at that time, the concept of like grass fed beef wasn't a thing. Like you could barely find it. I mean, you get it like your farmers markets and sort of like, a little bit of an underground situation, but you couldn't find it. And I remember my first meeting with a big grocery retailer. I was like, hey, we make the first grass-fed beef jerky in the market. And they went, what's grass-fed beef?
Yeah.
So,
right.
I mean, really tremendous progress in the last 15 years, but particularly the last decade, I think we've seen it accelerate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so awesome. And it's crazy that this much has changed in such a small period of time when you can go into Walmart and Target and Aldi and Costco and see things that you'd have to go to the crunchy aisle of the health food, co-op or whatever, or conventional, grocery stores would put it in one specific aisle, right? It's like, that's the healthy aisle. But now it's amongst everything else because there's so much innovation.
Totally. 100%, man. And I just appreciate the pioneering that you did on your side here. Speaking of, you said international, and I don't think I realized that you also serve international patients and clients. How, I guess, how broad is your reach, and are you comfortable sharing how large is your practice today, about how many patients you all see annually?
Yeah. We have different models. So we have everything as far as the, like different paths or different people. And I tried to build different systems of telehealth support, to meet people where they're at. So we have everything from group telehealth models for people to make functional medicine as accessible and affordable as it can, where they're still meeting with me on a regular basis in smaller group settings. And they have their own coaches. We have hybrid models where people have their own team and they're getting labs and they're still meeting with me. And then we have one-on-one concierge. So there's a few hundred when you look at all the different models. But one-on-one concierge where people are getting labs and that, we keep that smaller, to preserve quality of care and one-on-one attention. There's only so much bandwidth wise we can fit in a day.
Sure.
But certainly the smaller or the more group models are more scalable and we're able to fit more, hundreds of people in there. So everything in between. And, we see people all over the world, predominantly in the United States. We have patients in Australia, throughout Europe, in Asia, in the Middle East, actually quite a bit. There's quite a need or a demand, I would say, in Qatar, in Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, that are really looking for, functional medicine, and somehow they find me.
Perfect segue, because over the last 15 years, you've built a really incredible practice. Where did you get your first patients from? Like, where did they come from? How do you attract them?
Yeah, it was social media, but in the early days, like before all the algorithms and manipulation, I think, of things, and more voices too. I think there was just more of a purity in the content that was online, I think. And it reached people who needed it. And, I'd like to say those are the good old days, but they were in many ways the good old days, whereas social media was, I think, a lot more lighter and freer, and more honest. So, I see it was online is really what it was. I was writing about functional medicine, talking about it on like the earlier podcasts, and, doing YouTube videos and things. So yeah, that was where most people heard about me. And, that's how it came to be. And then it just kind of evolved over the years.
Are you still writing?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I, I, they used to say content was king, right? That was always the saying, right? Content was king. I don't know if that's true or not anymore. I'm still acting like content is king because I love writing about this stuff. So I think I see content as education. I think education is king. Empowerment is king. So yeah, we're still writing on a regular basis. Not just me. So me, yes. but also the team as well, for drwillcole.com primarily, because there's so much exciting stuff coming down in the scientific literature that we want to make understandable and bring context to the headlines in the health blogosphere, or the health world, because you see the headlines, right? And like, this causes this, and people want to know what's really the context behind this, and it's normally not what the headlines make it out to be. And sometimes it is, but we want to bring our functional medicine perspective to that.
Speaking of, and this is totally just me riffing here for a second. There was a I don't know if it was commentary or a study, I can't remember, but I definitely read an article where I think it was 20 doctors or scientists that work for the NIH said something along the lines of, it's inconclusive whether or not ultra processed foods contribute to chronic disease. It was very recent. Do you recall that? And did you opine on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I did opine on that. And there were several actually reports in media, like down the press, people either commenting, or studies that were done, or government policy was made, saying that, yeah, it's backwards, right? We have the most chronic disease, as I mentioned earlier. We eat foods that don't love us back. Somehow there's the random spin that you'll see every now and then where they're going to die on that hill. Like, they're going to die on that hill somehow. I don't know why they want to. But they're on the wrong side of history.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair. I appreciate that, that saying that they're going to die on that hill.
Literally.
All right. Well, pivoting back to writing, you've written a few books. Is it 4? You have 4 books?
4 books. Yeah.
Wow. Are they, I want to talk about this for a second, because, people have suggested that I write a book someday. I don't know that I haven't have it in me to do it, but I also have a bunch of people that I know listen to this podcast that are aspiring authors.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you even start when it comes to writing a book?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I, as I mentioned a moment ago, I love writing. So for me, in high school, really goes back to high school for me, where it's like, I was in journalism. I was in like the newspaper, like high school. So I was like the weird nerd that I really, really just loved journalism. Even weirder, I would, on a Friday night when other kids would be going to parties, I'd be watching 2020 with Hugh Downs and Barbara Walters. And I loved journalism in the weirdest of ways. I watched Bill O'Reilly. I watched Bill Maher when he had Politically Incorrect on ABC. So these guys that I still watch today, like, I still watch Bill Maher today, he's amazing. And whether you agree or disagree with these people, they're just, I think, good journalists or pundits on television. I love Meet the Press with Tim Russert. I love this written stuff. So the idea of talking about something or writing about something in a journalistic fashion and making it easy to understand, I've always been really passionate about. So melding that with what I do came naturally to me. So writing about this stuff was just, I was like, I couldn't stop me. Like, I felt like hugely, and this is my path. And I think that's the thing too, is that when there's people who have with podcasts, or people with books, or people doing projects, it's like, my path doesn't have to be somebody else's path. So I think if someone's out there that's feeling like, oh, I'm feeling like I'm like not successful if I don't write a book, or if I don't have a podcast, that may not be your calling. And I think it's okay to be inspired by other people's path, but like translating that to you, and like maybe the spirit behind it, but not actually the thing. But for me, it was like a natural thing of knowing, all right, like, there's only so many hundreds of articles I could write before like that, the book made sense to be the next thing. And it was, I thought it would never happen, to be honest with you. I thought, like, I'm never going to write a book. Like, who the heck does this? I'm from Western Pennsylvania, small town kid, still live here now, which is why we're in telehealth, because a lot of people aren't here. And I'm like, not in New York or LA. How the heck am I going to do this? But it's just, when you do enough of what you're supposed to do and keep your, head to the ground and stay in your lane. And I don't mean that in a, like, people could say, like, stay in your lane is a bad thing, but I'm saying, like, what is your calling, and staying true and authentic to that calling, I think ripple effects will happen from that. And for me, it was just a natural ripple effect of that cascade. And, I met the actual practical first step for me was, getting a literary agent. And she really helped me craft like a proposal and kind of getting it out there in the world. So the practical step was a literary agent, but people don't even actually need a literary agent. You can actually do it without a literary agent. But it's getting into the book world, right? And she was in the industry for a long time. She's still my literary agent now. And, her name's Heather Jackson. She's wonderful and like a dear friend of mine, but she's been with me throughout all 4 books. And, she did Dr. Atkins' book. She did a lot of people back in the 90s as a publisher. She actually was on the publishing side. But I think that's what it is. It's getting somebody in that industry and then learning from them on how to craft a proposal and a concept, because the book world is very, especially in the health book world, they're very, formulaic about it all. Like you may have a concept, but they just don't see it as a vision, as sellable. And I've been lucky enough where more or less they kind of caught my vision, but you really, have to know the way they see it from a business standpoint and a publishing world standpoint. It's interesting, man. I've learned so much from them over the years of how they see this and sort of the economics of the publishing world.
Got it. So it begins, one begins with following your calling and do what you're passionate about, right? I mean, I think that's the no brainer here. And, a lot of people do get caught up in that, comparison and I think imposter syndrome or whatever it might be. We kind of all get caught up in that from time to time.
Yeah.
But practically speaking, don't go it alone. And ensure you've got a really great literary agent who can help package that proposal up and put it in front of the right publishers. Sounds like is very critical.
Yeah, for sure. And like a lot of doctors they'll get like a co-writer to help you craft things. You could go down that route. I didn't for my first book. I just wrote it myself. But you can get, like, I've had a couple books that I had a co-writer, but I'm such a control freak with the writing that I end up having to change anything anyways. It's nice because they can help to like organize some thoughts, but not necessary. If you love writing, then write it. And don't let people, I think this is another piece of advice, is that you're going to get a lot of people telling you what they think you should do. I would just say, learn when to listen and compromise because you may not know best, but also know when, no, this is a non-negotiable for me. I'd rather not do it than do it the way they're telling me to do it. And there's going to be, and that applies to any space, right? When you're collaborating with different people, especially bigger corporations, you're going to have to say no sometimes and be okay with walking away.
Yeah. Hardest thing to do is to walk away from something like that. I totally relate. Yeah. How long does it take you to write a book? How long did it take you to write your first one?
A while. Yeah. I mean, that was considered, Ketotarian was my first book. So that came out in 2018. That was considered what they called a crash schedule because we pitched the concept, they loved it, but it was like, well, the keto bubble was like really out there. And I was talking about this sort of more whole foods, Mediterranean, more plant-based ketogenic approach that also didn't fear carbs and talked about carb cycling and things like that when that wasn't sexy with the whole ketogenic world. So, I can't remember how long it was, probably a year, but that book was half recipes. So I worked with registered dietitians and all of that stuff. So it was like half the amount of text I had to write. It was more of like a cookbook / book. But the second book, The Inflammation Spectrum, was all book and some recipes. So that took about 2 years for that book.
Wow. So you're doing a ton of research.
Yeah. But again, I did this for a living. So I that was another thing too, where yes, it was research, but I was already writing articles. So it was just kind of, how do I put all of my thoughts in the book, but the research was already basically done because it wasn't like it was new topic for me to talk about. It was just a new topic for me to put in book form.
Are there any pitfalls that you would call out as it relates to attempting to publish a book? Something that you didn't know, wish you knew when you went into it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say back to the literary agent is going to be a good, because in some ways they're an agent, but it's also a sort of, I don't want to say legal, but there is like a lawyer aspect to these book contracts, especially when you're talking about a big publishing house. I was with Penguin Random House for all my books, and beneath Penguin Random House, there's imprints within it, right? There's things like Rodale or different ones. Who was I with? Avery. Avery was my first one. So, and they're all fantastic people. But when you're dealing with people that are they're some of the biggest corporations. I mean, they are the biggest corporations in the book world. So contracts are contracts, and I don't understand all the legalese and stuff. So to have a agent that knows the legalese, I think is a good thing. Of like, I would, if I didn't have her, I never would know what that means, like that percentage if a miss, and the negotiations of these random aspects of the deal is important. But and also I would say this too is that it's so true is that you like writing a book is the worst way to one of the worst ways to make money. Like if you're going to write a book to make money, like find another way to make money because it's not like writing a book is the worst. Like if you calculated how many hours you're working, you're like working way, way less than minimum wage for most books. It is like even with an advance and all that stuff, even from the best publishing house in the world, it is not good. Now, look, if you're like the less than 1% in your book and becomes a like iconic zeitgeist thing, then great. Make money when the book comes out and everything. But the average person out there, I would say do it for the passion of it and doing it because of, Terry Walls, Dr. Terry Walls is a colleague of mine. I'm sure you know Terry. Like she told me years ago, she actually was another mentor that I had helping me with the book world because she wrote her book before mine. And I really relied on Dr. Terry Walls about, as a doctor, how do I do this? And she said, the book is your business card, right? That's really what it is. It's showing the world what you do, but it's not necessarily like, this is like gonna pay the bills. It's that a book is not going to pay the bills for the vast majority of people. And there are definitely smarter, more effective ways to earn a living, and it's not writing a book. So I think that's something to think about because people may think it's something else and it's not that, because it's a labor of love for sure.
Love it. Really, really good, solid advice, man. Thank you for sharing that so candidly.
Yeah.
You've got a few books. You got 4 books.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your medical practice. You've got your writing that you do continuously, and you have a podcast.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
When did you start the podcast?
Well, I've been podcasting for a long time. My current podcast, I think I started in 2020.
Okay.
I started with Dear Media. I'm with Dear Media, which is the production company. They're great. And that before that, I did Goop. Goops, if you know Goop, it's Gwyneth Paltrow's wellness brand. I did they had a first spin-off podcast called Goop Fellas, which I helped come up with the name because I thought that was like a great name.
Brilliant name.
Yeah. It was me and Seamus Mullen. Do you know Seamus?
I don't know.
Yeah. He's great. He's a chef. He's a great guy. And we were the Goop Fellas and we interviewed people like we interviewed so many people. Rob Lowe. We interviewed Kenneth Cole, the shoe guy who was just a fascinating, great, and so many people. I mean, so go back and listen to those episodes if people want to go back and listen to Goop Fellas.
I'm going to go back.
Yeah, it's 2019, 2018. It was short-lived because there was a pandemic and it was like with the apparatus of business and Goop just decided, hey, let's shelve this for now. And then that kind of, I was like, okay, I'll do my own thing. And, before Goopfellas, I did a podcast called Keto Talk. And I did that for years, answering people's like deep, wonky science nerd biohacking questions about fasting and functional medicine, ketogenic diet, carnivore diet before it was even a thing. So I did that for years. And then from Keto Talk, I did Goopfellas. And then from Goopfellas, I met Michael Bostic, who, is the head of Dear Media, as a guest. I was on one of their podcasts, and he said, if you ever want to do your own podcast, just reach out to me. So I was like, yeah, I reached out to Michael, and I started The Art of Being Well, which is my podcast now, and been going on for a few years now, for 4 years. Yeah.
How do you, as an emerging human in the podcast world,
Yeah.
what advice do you have for growing a loyal following and getting people to listen?
Yeah. Well, I would say you ask good questions. So the first and foremost is like, you actually have to have a curiosity. And I think that your talk, like you and I would have this conversation whether people were listening to it or not. And I think that's the bigger thing, is you're coming from a place of authenticity, of wanting to have authentic conversations and things you're interested in. I think some people, back to that earlier thing, is that they're doing it because they think they should do it, and everybody's a podcaster now. So they're just going through the motions and they're sort of playing a role versus like being themselves. And they're like overly following the script because it's like, how could they deviate from the script? They're uncomfortable with it. And I get it. It's not for everybody. It shouldn't be for everybody. It is kind of a rat race and oversaturated out there. But I would say just stay true to your calling. Kind of my advice for writing. I would say the same thing for podcasts. And then just be consistent. And that's the same advice I'd give for a writer out there, because it's like, write and then write when you don't feel like writing, and be consistent with your writing. And same with podcasts. Like, put out an episode don't give up. Like, stay consistent with that, because you never know when, something would hit, or maybe it doesn't even need to. Maybe you're just doing it for the love of it, even if only 10 people listen, and not comparing yourself to other people and feeling like, oh, if you don't hit this number, you're a failure. You're like, why are you doing this? And check yourself, because it doesn't really, maybe it matters for your business, maybe it matters for someone's business out there, but maybe it's not the right path for you. Maybe it's not the right tool, and that's okay. And I was talking to the guy, who he was he still is the CEO of Beachbody. And you remember P90X? Like, P90X was like massive, right? And he told me exactly what I say in my life. He saw it at a massive level. He's like, P90X was like, yeah, I did okay. And it's like, but one day, months or even years later, it like hit off and did $1 billion. Like, that's like, how many consistent, like, unsexy, was tough days. I was like, it's just going to do it. But they believed in it. They stayed consistent with it. And then it ended up being something that you can just say P90X and everybody knows that was like a hit back. So I think there's a lot of examples of that, where people just need to stay consistent with that calling.
Man, I so appreciate those words, even on a very personal level. And you're right. I actually, when I started thinking about our conversation that we were going to have today, I'm like, what do I actually want him to like? What am I super curious about? Like, if you and I just jumped on the phone and we're talking, I think that's really important. To highlight here. So I want to go back for a second, because look, you juggle, like, we've talked about these things that you're juggling, right? You have this international practice, you've had books, you write, you have the podcast, there's lots of things that you're juggling in your life, but you also have a family.
Yeah.
How many kids do you have?
Two.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're in Western Pennsylvania, right? You're not in LA, you're not in New York, where you have all access to some of the things that you were talking about. What's been the most difficult thing for you when it comes to all of your ambitions and passions, that you have to help people, but then also, like, you have responsibilities at home. How do you hold it together?
Well, I would say having a great team around me, like my clinic manager, she's been with me my entire career. Right? I mean, so she's been with me all 15 years. Most of my team have been with me 7, 8, 9, years, right? So I think having people you really trust that are like family to you at work is an important part. I'm not saying it has to be that way, but for me, people that are supportive and really looking out for you is important professionally. And that's so interconnected with the family stuff. And then honestly, for me, it's on a personal side, it's having a wife that really is so understanding and supportive. And I know not everybody has that, and it can be difficult. And I don't want to, sugarcoat this. It wasn't always easy, and it's not like we always saw eye to eye on, how I was spending my time. And there are many times where she said, you aren't present enough at home, or you do need to be more present when you are here because you are gone for 10 hours a day consulting patients. So I think that and that's part of being in a relationship of like, oh yeah, calling, being able to hear the tough things where you're kind of lacking and wanting to be better. So I'd like to say like, the way that I juggle it is largely to do with the people in my life that are just understanding that I'm going to not always get it right and want to do better the next day. And also, like on this side of parenting, like now that I have two teenagers, the cliche is so deafening to me of the days are long, but the years are short. And I think that anybody that's a parent or anybody is just your loved ones soaking in the time that you have with them, because it's so like like I think it was Shakespeare that said the bloody tyrant time. I feel like time is a bloody tyrant, and it's like looking back at my son who's about to go to college now, and is just what the heck. Where's my baby going? And I'm in full transparency. I'm like I'm mourning right now, going through this with my son because he's my best friend, and to be able to not be able to get that time back. And in some ways, it's so like I had to build what I built professionally, you can't be all things to all people in that way, right? Something's going to suffer. If I would have been more of a dad and did less work, this would have suffered. And I tried the best I could in the moment. And I think one practical thing that I did do that I would say is a pocket of grace is that nearly every time I traveled, whenever I could, I took one of my kids with me. So
Mm.
that's a time that I look back, and we have one of those digital screens. And I know not everybody could do this, but I didn't even care if they wanted me to or not, right? If they didn't want me to, it was like a non-negotiable for me. 9 times out of 10, I took one of them or both of them with me. So for me, it was like, okay, if I'm going to work, and if it's going to be beyond the 10 hours that I'm at the telehealth clinic, and if I had to travel for work, I'm going to bring one of my kids with me. Because I'm already gone a lot. So for me, it was like cool experiences because they got to see different cities, and like we always did something fun. And we have so many fun stories that I had with them over the years. So even though I worked a lot, and I didn't always get it right, I think there's some silver linings of really cool experiences that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to get with them. So yeah, I think that's the best advice I'd have for anybody out there.
Man, I'm stealing that one because we're about to enter a season with my kids that we're much more flexible, and I travel enough, and I hate being away, and I
Mm-hmm.
hate I do so many like crazy in and out days, like where it's like if I've got a meeting at Target headquarters in Minneapolis, like I'll fly on a 5 a.m. flight, do the meeting at noon, and get on a 5 p.m. flight back home
Yeah.
because I don't want to stay overnight and I don't want to
Yeah.
be away. But I love the concept of being, to the extent you have the
Mm-hmm.
means and that you're able to, like, if you can bring them, like, what an incredible
Yeah.
experience to expose them to and for
Yeah.
you all to have together.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I absolutely love that. You mentioned something I wanna go back to real quick. You mentioned something about not all being rainbows and butterflies, and how there were times when you had to be checked based on how you were spending your time and based on how you were maybe not as balanced as you could be in the
Mm-hmm.
home life. I'm just real curious, like, as someone who has a hard time turning off
Hmm.
myself. Like, I'm just real curious about like, what are those conversations like? And did you get defensive at first?
Hmm.
And then how did you respond? And how did you resolve
Hmm.
to to compromise and move forward?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, I'm I have a penchant towards being more defensive for sure, especially coming off with a certain work with a certain sort of frequency and resonance of like, even though I'm in healthcare and I'm talking about nervous system dysregulation and breath work and meditation, and I do practice those myself. When you are a caretaker and a healthcare provider, you're holding space for heavy things. And you have to be mindful with my line of work and when anybody is dealing with people, but certainly it's, I think, amplified with someone in my line of work when you're dealing with people with heavy health issues or they're not feeling the best, right? And then you're holding that frequency and needing to like clear that stuff out. Going to home with that isn't always the best. And especially when you're looking, and I think many people that work outside the home can resonate with this, that it's like you just need some decompression time, right? And if you have a partner that maybe isn't working outside the home, I think this dynamic can happen where they're waiting for you to come home and and they can pass the baton, like, okay, you've got it now, and you're just like, no, I'm ready to shut down now. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's just wrapping my mind around the fact, and I still have to check myself of like, oh wait, like my day's not over. Like she can't leave her job. Her job is there. And I need to realize that I'm coming into that territory right now and I can't just be off. Now, I think it's fair to say that like maybe it's understandable and she gives me sort of this time period to like kind of shift my resonance, and maybe it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. But then it's like, okay, no, I need you here. I need you to be there. But no, there's been many an argument. I will not sugarcoat it. There's been many arguments of just give me a break, basically, is my point. Like I've been working all day, but yet she's doing the same. So yeah. And also I would not say this is an total excuse, because you could be a jerk at any age. But like I did get married very young. I got married at 21 years old. Um, I You're an idiot in your 20s and 30s, I would say. Like I look around, and now at 40, I'm like, yeah, there are many idiots in 20. And I was raising a kid. I was raising kids and like acting like I was an adult at that. So I'm like, I give myself a little grace because I grew up in like I was not fully who I wanted to be, for sure.
You know what? No one talks about this though, Will,
Yeah,
and I appreciate you being candid about it because
yeah.
it's something that like, people look at you or they look at people like you who, look, you have a large social media following, you have a successful practice, you've written books, right? People look at you and think, man, this guy, he's got it all together. And you've done some really great things. But also like you're a human
Hmm.
and there's also room for you to screw it up a little bit, and you've had to really come to terms with and have plenty of disagreements about
Hmm.
how you spend your time, how you balance your time, and coming to that realization, the awareness that you just illustrated around, oh, I've been working all day, right? So you walk in the door and like it's your time to turn off. Well,
Hmm.
so is she. Like that
Hmm.
level of awareness, number
Yeah,
one, is incredible, and number two, I don't think we talk about it enough.
yeah.
And I think we should, because the only way we're going to make progress and the only way that we're going to, people are going to survive this journey that we're all in together is to start
Hmm.
to have that level of awareness, and then go, oh my God, yeah, like she doesn't ever get to turn off, or
Hmm.
he doesn't ever get to turn off, or whatever it is. And we've got to find a way to,
Hmm. Yeah,
harmonize it all. I also
yeah.
got married at 21. So I think you and I can relate on that level. And I completely agree. You are an absolute idiot in your 20s. So there you go. Especially men. But, I got two more quick questions for you, man. And then we can, I'll cut you loose. One is a piggyback on the conversation that we're having right now about, um, about your family and sort of how this all fits together in your work life.
Hmm.
Um, what did you have to give up?
Hmm.
What did you have to give up in order to have, to build the family that you've built, and to build the career that you've built. There was something in the middle there. I often find that you have to give up.
Hmm. I think one thing is, well, I think on the professional side, just to repeat myself, I do think that I gave up more time with my family. I definitely came home most evenings unless I was traveling without them, but I'm trying to make that rare. I gave up more time. Like I was, and to me, like you said, I never turn. It's hard to turn off. Like those 4 books. I was seeing patients during the week.
Mm,
I wrote my books on the weekend,
mm,
4 back to back. So I look back on that, and that was one thing that I kind of have. Like that's why I'm not writing a book right now. Like I really am taking a break with this because it's kind of this weird, uh, new season of my life where my son is, I mentioned like being in mourning. My son's going to college. I'm very happy for him. I'm very excited for him, but I'm also mourning the loss of the time that we had. And I'm also like, I'm thinking of all those weekends where yes, I loved writing. I talked about that, but the trade-off was I wasn't present with my family when I was
mm,
writing with it. And I had a full patient schedule. So I couldn't like give up on that either. So, and I was with them, but it's not fully present when you're like typing on, on
right.
a MacBook. So, but beyond that, the in between, if you're saying the trade off, I think what it is when you have a young family and you're growing that and you're married. And then on the other side, you're growing your business and that's sort of a baby too. What I lost was as an introvert, alone time. Like there was
Uh,
like I love people, but I also love to recharge. So I have found that over the years of being a go, go, go and always having to be even on and present for my family, it's that, nervous system, I think regulation that some of us need more than others of just some stillness and some alone time. So I would say that's something that I did not have the luxury or the privilege to have over the past 20 years.
Man, thank you. Thank you for that. The vulnerability that you're putting on display here is really admirable, and I appreciate it. Question I meant to ask you earlier while we were on your practice that I didn't get to ask, and I want to make sure we get it in, and then we'll close it down. You've seen a lot of patients over the last 15 years. You've seen the industry change. What red flags are prevalent in people's health today that cause you the most concern?
I think, 2 things. I think the rise of autoimmune conditions as a whole, and I think every year more and more things science recognizes as having autoimmune components or being classified as an overt, autoimmune condition. There's like we're having, I call it sadly the age of autoimmune, and it has to do with the environmental um, implications of what's going on with our food supply and environmental toxins and the soil microbiome and its intimate connection to the gut microbiome. So that's not going anywhere. The things we are prioritizing on a personal level and on a larger societal level, this is not going anywhere. So the autoimmune burden that we're seeing on a micro and macro level is concerning to me. And then right there, and maybe even more in some ways, when you think of the existential side of it, is the infertility, the rise of infertility. I mean, some reports are saying the United States, I think being one of the top ones, is like a 50% drop in sperm motility and sperm health, the rise of fertility in both men and women. This is not looking good. And so I'd say the autoimmune component and the infertility component are the most concerning for me. But look, the flip side is we know more than ever before on the variables that are at play here, but we have to do something different to see something different. So I think that's the double-edged sword here. It's like, yes, we're faced with so much darkness, but that's equally proportional to that darkness is the capacity for light to fill it up if we do it, if we give it the chance to do so. So I think that those are the 2 things that I think about the most.
Wow. absolutely incredibly enlightening. We could probably talk on that subject alone for the next 5 hours, but we'll drop it here. Will, how can people find you if they want to follow your writing, if they want to listen to your podcast or get in touch with your practice?
Thanks, man. Everything's at drwillcole.com. That's drwillcole.com. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Will Cole, on TikTok, all that things. And yeah, the podcast is called The Art of Being Well. But thanks, man.